Good to go. Hey. So major spoilers ahead from the very start of this video, like immediately. So if you haven't seen Horse Girl, go watch it. It's a great film. We're going to be talking about it at length, and from the very beginning, there's major spoilers. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I was watching Horse Girl. I knew nothing about the film before watching it other than the Netflix trailer. After it finished, I said to myself, so she had carbon monoxide poisoning, right? I Googled it, assuming that there would be a plethora of posts suggesting the same theory, or maybe even something about her potential anemia, but to my astonishment, there was nothing. I did find an article with an interview with Alison Brie, star and co-writer of the film, which alluded to the mysteries in the film. Alison even set a challenge to the Reddit fanbase, asking them to pick the film apart, which at time of recording this, I haven't seen much of either. So my instinct was to write a fan theory on Reddit. But those can be very hit or miss. The last time I posted a fan theory, it was like farting into the wind, I guess. What's more, this film had so much thought put into it, I just had to make a video essay about it. Okay, so before we go and do like some sort of deep dive into the film, I start with my theory. I suspect that Sarah, our titular horse girl, is not falling victim to a mental health episode caused by her family genetics, as the film overtly suggests. Nor is she a clone of her dead grandmother, as she suggests, or suspects, I guess. Instead, Sarah is suffering from a deep trauma from events in her past, which is causing her to disassociate. And what we are witnessing is the observation of one's self, like literally. And that's how we should read this film, only from her point of view. She is naive, not very self-aware, and slightly oblivious to how to interact with the world as well, giving us a unique perspective into her world. Oh, and she should be tested for anemia, which she likely has. The family history of mental issues is a self-fulfilling prophecy, or maybe just a red herring, just like the carbon monoxide was for me, which I fell for first time round. What's more, the way the film is shot, structured and edited means that her dreams are disguised as real life and therefore blur into scenes that are real, which is beautifully ingenious in its simplicity and is executed brilliantly in this film. I'm going to go through this film chronologically as I think it helps me to clarify where I think the film is showing real world and then what we see that is her dreams and then her eventual dissociative episodes. I'll also explain some of my thinking as we go. I could spend ages talking about this film and dissecting it. It was a great film, but I'll try to zip through some bits to try and focus more on others that will help me convey my thinking. I'll preface this analysis by saying I don't have all the answers or answers to every question that I can see, but I wanted to get the dialogue going, I guess. I wanted to get the discussion kicked into gear for anyone finding this movie for the first time and like me searched online and felt a bit disappointed by the emptiness. Watch this and please feedback and riff off this if you want. Anyway, so the film, I try to explain as I go and cue some sort of card for the film. I've only just done like a rough cut and it's like long. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you for those of you that will endeavor to get through this. I apologize. The film opens with Sarah and her co-worker Joan talking casually about river dance, as you do, and genetic history. We see the two working until Joan sees the back of a horse pass by outside. Is river dance a metaphor for family genetics or just herself? A deep-rooted dance that appears complex and hyperactive from the waist down while stoic and in control from the waist up? People tell me I have an overactive imagination. We then see Sarah's typical day at work, interacting with colleagues and customers, and if you have an eagle eye, you will spot a man we will later know as Ron pass by the shop outside. Sarah leaves work, gets in her car, and takes the boot off the steering wheel, placing it on the passenger seat, setting up a callback for later on. Cut to the farm where she is watching a girl ride the horse she had previously ridden prior to an accident. Sarah goes on to provide her with unsolicited advice on how the girl should ride him. She drives home and puts the boot on the car. Later that night, she's at home watching Purgatory, which looks like an early noughties fantasy show we will later discover that she's rewatched several times. While she's watching, Sarah is making an ankle bracelet. Of note, later she will also make a lanyard and necklace for the horse. Also of note, this is a show that will lead her to believe that she is a clone. So she sets the alarm for 7 a.m. and goes to sleep. That night, her roommate's boyfriend wakes up to get a drink of water and finds Sarah staring at the wall. It's assumed that she's been sleepwalking. He wakes her, she runs to bed. Cut to Sarah is standing concerned in the shower. Water, and more specifically the shower, plays a major role in this film's symbolism. As we later discover, her mother had committed suicide last year. Sarah had found her in a room with the shower running in the background. From this moment, a deep trauma developed for Sarah, which now triggers her emotional grief whenever water is introduced. As if it were planned, we cut to Sarah in the cemetery sitting by her mother's grave. At work, her colleague Joan gives her her birthday present, a DNA test, before leaving to go answer the phone. Sarah then has a wonderful moment with a customer who's a tarot reader. They find the peach colour she was searching for, and the tarot reader tells her the colour is protective, and gives her some sage/business card on sage thing. This is one of my favourite and most rewatched moments of the film, not because of any mysterious clues. It's all about Alison Brie's captivating performance. Watching her serve customers earlier, and especially here, is beautiful. She doesn't throw this moment away as many actors can do. Instead, in this brief exchange, we really see the deeper objective of the character. We see her innocence and her kindness. After the interaction, we hear Joan answer the phone again. But as before, there's no one on the other line, and she says hello twice. Later at the farm, Sarah has returned to watch the young girl riding her horse, Willow, and wishes him a happy birthday, attaching the gift she made to his hair. Apparently they share the same birthday. The woman tells her to get some water as she looks a little thirsty. At aerobics, she tries to make friends to spend her birthday with, but people are uninterested. So she watches Purgatory, of course, which introduces us to a new character, Hades. Whilst watching, she spits into a DNA test tube. Of note, we don't ever see Sarah receive the DNA test results, a mystery that is never solved. I don't think. When her roommate Nikki arrives home, she encourages Sarah to celebrate her birthday with them and another friend, the love interest Darren. Sarah gets ready, wanting to wear her grandma's dress, but thankfully she doesn't. Yet. She meets Darren, they smoke weed, and he talks about his ex-girlfriend. Suddenly her nose bleeds and we wonder if she has a medical condition. The roommate's boyfriend has a great little rap voice.
Where you going? I just want another Jello shot. Yeah, I have the rainbow sprinkles with the cone. Every time I talk, it's a fucking poem.
She tilts her head back to stop the bleeding, and then we hear a beautiful aside in the background as the boyfriend tells Darren.
And she sleepwalks.
Under the influence of weed, Sarah does a horse-inspired Zumba dance with Darren. They have a sweet, awkward moment when his cab arrives. He leaves, she vomits. This is when the first of 5 dreams occur. In this dream, Sarah wakes up laying on a table in a sterile room next to 2 people, and that's all we see of the dream. Cut to the next day. Sarah wakes up in the real world. Her roommate references scratches on the wall. It's implied that Sarah did it while sleepwalking. Darren comes to pick up his car and ask her out on a date. At work, she has another nosebleed, this time all over the agate.
Oh, I don't like those agates. Nobody's going to buy them.
Joan suggests she can stop the bleeding by leaning forward. Outside, a man is shouting about something called statico-satellite. Simultaneously, another man walks past, who Sarah recognizes from her dream. This is Ron. Curious. Again, the phone rings and Joan answers, but no one's on the line, and Joan says hello twice.
Great Legs, this is Joan. Can I help you? Hello? Hello?
Completely separate side note, but out of interest, I can't find anything in the real world called the statico-satellite. However, there is a wiki page for the term statite, which derives from the words static and satellite. It's a hypothetical type of satellite that uses a solar sail to change orbit. Anyway, later, Sarah visits her friend, who it transpires suffered a disability due to an accident on a horse, which Sarah was a witness to. This is Sarah's first major trauma in her life, the second being the death of her mother, as we will discover. Sarah gives the friend an anklet that she had made. On her journey home, she stops at an intersection to stare at water tanks. This, the water tanks, is her trigger to get lost in her thoughts about her mother's suicide, to the point where she disassociates from reality. Cut to Sarah's second dream. She's at home, transfixed by water running down the kitchen drain. She gets into bed, but hears voices outside her door. She assumes it's her flatmate and her boyfriend, but we later find out that neither of them were home. Then the alarm goes off, signaling the end of the dream. The implication here is that Sarah fell asleep in the car staring at the water tanks, exited the car and sleepwalked home. Moreover, it seems that Sarah doesn't remember where she fell asleep, maybe because in her dream she was going to bed, so she doesn't realize she didn't even make it home from her friend's house. That morning her car is missing, and the perfectly timed Paul Reiser saves the day. Of note, she says hello twice on the phone before he says anything. It's a beautiful motif that will pop up often in this film, which I will try to explain my thinking around later on.
Hello? Hello?
Hello? Sarah? Can you hear me?
The car is at the impound and it is registered to Gary, played by Paul Reiser, who is her dead mother's ex-husband who brought her up and she thought was her dad for a while. So the garage called him, he called her. It suggested he hasn't really been around since her mother passed last year. However, he does have loads of money, so he can sleep at night. I think this is important to point out here. This is the first family member we're being introduced to, and we're a third of the way into the movie. So it's fair to say, from what we've seen so far, she hasn't many friends, nor does she have any family, and those around her won't be invested enough to help her when she needs it. The manager of the impound suggests the car was not stolen. It looks instead as if it were abandoned by the owner with no gas. Meanwhile, Sarah stares at the boot on the passenger seat, exactly where she always leaves it, as we had seen before, thus reinforcing the idea that she fell asleep in the car and sleepwalked home. Sarah knows something is not right and asks Paul Reiser about her mum and grandmother's mental health issues. A MacGuffin or truth? Either way, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy which will begin to manifest as soon as Sarah begins to question it herself. Back at the farm, Sarah wants to take the horse out for a ride, but Joe reminds her that she's not your horse anymore, and the lanyard is missing. Her innocence here is really endearing, and again it's down to Alison Brie's performance. Cut to later that night. Or are we already in Dream 3? That's the beauty of this film, as it doesn't make a big deal of telling the audience what's real and what's a dream. Sarah stares at the images of her mother and grandmother whilst mimicking her pose in the mirror as her grandmother's dress is laid out next to her. Still in the dream, as I suspect it to be, Sarah gets into bed and sets her alarm. The clock next to her reads 11:02, and she starts to hear voices outside the door again, a sign of the dream as we have heard them before. Then she closes her eyes. Now, in this deeper sleep, and another dream within a dream, we see a white ramp over the water. This is new. Then we see Sarah back in the sterile room laying next to Ron, the guy that walked past her shop. We also see a shadowy figure passing her. We transition to the next scene via a windmilling sheet, or at least that's the best way I can describe it, as we don't exactly know what it is. We will also see this motif later. Now, out of the dream, we join Sarah waking up outside on the street, holding a payphone with her pajama top on backwards. She walks back to the house, asking her roommate to open the door and telling her,
Hi, sorry, I think I was sleepwalking because my mom said that I have an overactive image. Good night.
Back in the bedroom, the time is now 11:04. This reinforces the theory that the dream started before the scene when the time on the clock was 11:02. There's no way she could have fallen asleep, had the dream, sleepwalked outside to the phone box, turned her top back to front, woken up, walked back home and knocked on the door all inside of 2 minutes. And if that wasn't enough, she has a missed call on her phone from an unknown number 25 minutes ago, suggesting to us that she probably went to bed at least half an hour to an hour ago. Flatmate concern at this point? None. A curious Sarah searches online for the term time loss, and the drop-down menu shows searches she's visited before, suggesting this isn't the first time she's been concerned enough to search online for information regarding her symptoms. The top search result is carbon monoxide poisoning, but this isn't giving Sarah the answer she wants. Instead, she already has another browser window open in the background, showing 3 tabs being researched about aliens and alien abductions. Additionally, the radio in the background is also playing a talk show about alien abductions and parallel universes. She's into the esoteric, if you haven't guessed.
Man, it's late outside. I looked at the clock and it's at 5 p.m.
The next day at work, she tells Joan about her strange experiences. And whilst all the online suggestions pointed towards carbon monoxide poisoning to be an immediate concern, she doesn't believe it to be so, and reaches for the alien abductions as the answer. Joan, however, is not so sure and reminds Sarah that her mother had mental issues. However, Sarah is distracted by seeing Ron, the guy that passed outside the shop and who later appeared in her dream, whilst the homeless man continues screaming about Statico Satellite in the background. Unable to concentrate in a Zumba class, Sarah tracks Ron down, and under the guise of asking for new pipes for her flat, she books him in to come and work on her kitchen. This interaction is painful to watch, but that's why it's so perfect, and we learn so much about how Sarah interacts with the world here. Suspicious, she tells him her name is Agatha Kane, as in the character from her favourite TV show Purgatory. At home, her DNA results still haven't arrived. So, last time Sarah associated her time loss with alien abductions. Let's see where her imagination is allowed to run if we combine the act of checking her DNA results whilst watching Purgatory. Clones? Clones. This leads Sarah back online to look up cloned cows and the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a concept that suggests an unknown barrier exists in species development, us included. And that's why detecting extraterrestrial life is rare or impossible, the Fermi paradox, because they always hit a barrier and die out. Sarah continues her research whilst knitting what will later become the horse's necklace. Tom arrives from the plumbing company to look at the pipes. She was expecting Ron. I don't want to spend long on this beat as Sarah came to by accident. However, Tom mentions the galvanized pipe in the flat is dangerous and her pipes have tons of sclerosis. Galvanized pipe is no longer used due to its internal corrosion, which causes major health concerns when it's used for drinking water. I don't think it's a clue or connected to her physical health, but worth mentioning. By the way, let's check in with her flatmate Nikki's level of concern at this point.
You're replacing the pipes?
Yeah, and I paid for them.
We're renting. I asked you to fix the scratches on the wall.
Feels like a near to nothing still. That night, Sarah stalks Ron, following him back to his house and watching him interact with his family from outside. Cut to the windmill cloth transition along with the shower head this time, this being a symbol of her mother's suicide. And now we're in dream number 4, where Sarah is back in the sterile room and we see the shadowy figure again. But this time a girl is laying beside her. This dream is short and she wakes up back inside the car outside Ron's house. As she wakes, she notices the sunroof is open and scratches on the ceiling of the car, similar to those that were on the wall in her apartment. So the scratches surface when she falls asleep, informing us that her dreams are more like nightmares that cause her deep pain. Now freaked out and unsure of herself, Sarah sages the apartment with the gift from the tarot reader, then tailors her grandmother's dress. But whilst doing so, she discovers bruising all over her body. This is another indication, along with her nosebleeds, that there are further concerns with her health. We leave this scene with a wonderful close-up of her mimicking her grandmother's pose from the photo. And in a superb edit, we cut to the next day where Sarah is visiting an ear, nose and throat doctor to fix her nosebleeds. Sarah uses the opportunity to show him her bruises and mentions her trouble sleeping, to which he suggests she should get some blood work done. And he mentions it could be anemia, which could explain her nosebleeds and the bruising. Of note, we know her symptoms aren't limited to nosebleeds and bruising easily. Whilst at the farm earlier, the woman said she looked like she could do with a drink of water. It might have been a throwaway comment to get Sarah to leave, but in a mystery, there are no throwaway comments. Seeing as the doctor was being so helpful, she also asks him how to know if she's a clone, to which he provides an excellent answer. But Sarah keeps pushing him out of his comfort zone with more talk of clones and then the TV show Purgatory. It's just a little too much for him to be able to help with. Later, Sarah goes completely into character, putting on her grandmother's dress for her date with Darren, which made me think of the transition scene in Vertigo. Anyway, her and Darren talk aliens. He's being polite and has a passing interest at best. However, Sarah has committed to the storyline she's pieced together in her mind. They make out and she wants to show him something. Unfortunately for him, it's another man's house. She directs Darren to drive to Ron's house, informing him that she sees Ron in her dreams, and then starts rambling about her dad and her grandfather being absent in her life as proof that she is a clone, along with the fact that her DNA results haven't come back yet, because in her logic they can't find her DNA if she's a clone. Shock. What was a cute, casual paranormal talk is suddenly a big red flag for him. Poor Darren. Completely oblivious to her imposing nature, Sarah wants to show Darren one more thing. It's her mother's grave. And Sarah wants Darren to help her dig up the corpse to extract her mother's DNA, which will help prove her theory, I think. And I can't work out if she wanted to use her scissors to dig her up, or were they extracting the DNA? I don't know. They're probably extracting the DNA. Okay, yeah. Darren realizes he's in too deep. What were they going to dig her up with? Darren realizes he's in too deep, and Sarah is confused as to why he doesn't see what she does, mentioning the Statico satellite, which the homeless man said at the start of the film. She heard him when she saw Ron pass the shop, and is now incorporating it into her delusion. Darren tries to be nice, but she gives him no choice but to leave. At home, Sarah has now gone over the edge. The house is covered in orange fabric, as she had made a mental note when the tarot reader had told her it was a protective colour. The blender is apparently left on to protect her from the Statico satellite, and she's back at it again with the sage. Oh, and of course, Purgatory's on in the background. Finally, her flatmate is starting to become concerned. The synergy between the direction and editing really stands out here. Sarah runs to the bathroom to escape the flatmate. Knowing that the water and shower are a trigger for her to get lost in her thoughts, we cut from Sarah in the shower to her workplace. But to just say that would be doing the editor a disservice. It's not just a cut to and from, it's a cut between, and it has its own rhythm and a life like that of a song. I really love the editing of this film a lot. So Sarah wakes up out of her sleepwalk, standing wet and screaming for her colleague to help her.
Joan! Joan!
Sarah covers herself in the same protective fabric the tarot reader had purchased. Joan rushes over to comfort her by enveloping Sarah within the fabric. Moments later in the back office of the shop, they talk. Meanwhile, the phone is ringing, but Joan doesn't answer. Then it rings again, but this time we see the phone light up from the incoming call. We've heard the phone ring before, but we haven't seen it ring before. Sarah answers it. However, it's Joan from the future on the other line. Joan realizes this is well out of her ability and calls the authorities in to help.
Hey, thank you for watching. Thank you for getting this far. I just think we need a breath there. There's a lot going on, and yeah, there's a lot more chaos to come. But we just need a moment just to digest that. And for me to say, look, if you made it this far, thank you. I have 2 short films I consider black comedy mysteries in their own respect. Nothing as great as Foolscale, right? But in my own little world, it's cool. And one is called Still Waters Run Deep. It's about a woman who sneaks out to follow her husband one night. And more recently, the last one I made was a film called Phlegm, which is, I suppose, about how, unfortunately, power corrupts. Yeah. I will put links in the description, and please take a moment to check them out. And back to the case. It's sad, but it's a great film. Enjoy.
Sarah is sectioned, revealing to us and the entry clerk that the only thing stopping her from suicide is her horse that she can't ride and her job. When Sarah gets taken to her room, we are made a point of being shown that the room has 2 beds, one for Sarah and another empty one. Later, Sarah meets her social worker. He suggests that they've met already last week. However, Sarah is having lapses in memory. She informs him of her alleged alien abductions and tells him about her grandmother's mental issues, which led her to be incarcerated for a period of time and then homeless before she died. Sarah also reveals that her mother suffered from severe depression, which led to her suicide. In a flashback, we see the moment where Sarah finds her mother dead near a running shower, causing the trauma that, along with the horse accident, sends her over the edge into delusion and soon to be dissociation. Back in her room, Sarah is falling asleep, and we cut to the 5th dream, where the room door is left open and she exits the building. We get a great shot of Sarah watching herself leaving the facility from the room window, with an enigmatic expression on her face. Still in the dream, Sarah goes to her apartment, but her flatmate Nikki suddenly has a different appearance, that being of the girl from her dream, which freaks her out, and Sarah locks herself in the bedroom. Still in the dream, the bedroom door begins to glow and the bed moves itself. Sarah climbs out of her window and walks to another door across the street. This door leads to her workplace, where lights are flashing inside. She then returns outside, holding the protective fabric, and wraps it around the building to the sound of her morning alarm. Still in the dream, or in a dream within a dream, we then witness Sarah back in her bedroom sewing together the most amazing suit for her and her horse out of the same fabric. Cut to the stable, where she is now in her superhero protective peach costume with her horse, who is also in his own similar outfit. But it does a poor job of protecting her, as Joe finds her and scares her away. Yeah! Now looking more ninja-like with her face mask on, she breaks into Ron's house to wake him by whispering at him, but he doesn't wake up. So she then goes to Darren's house, where he is totally cool with her and they share a romantic moment. Darren unzips her costume via a curtain draw rod, which is genius, and they make love. However, Darren now takes on the appearance of his namesake from the show Purgatory. After sex, they share some time together sewing, of course, before he disappears. The sound mix here is beautifully subtle and yet absorbing, keeping us intrigued in the dream and the plot of the film, which is fantastic. Still in the bedroom and under a clear night sky, Sarah then cuts through her fabric and her carpet to reveal the copper-replaced pipes and a large white void, which she steps into, whilst taking a moment to look back at the starry night behind her. In this dream within a dream within a dream, parallel worlds as she might see it, she sees people asleep and shadow figures with long fingers abusing their bodies, which she attributes to the bruises on her body. She also passes the white ramp on the water, but rather than go toward it, she continues to walk towards some steps which she climbs up. Cue the windmill effect, which fades us into Heather's bedroom, the girl who had brain damage as a child following the horse riding accident. Sarah gets into bed with her and they exchange a loving hi to one another. This is her trauma, and in this case, more specifically, her guilt playing out for herself in her dream. One might say this is okay, this is what dreams do. However, we know the problem here is that the self and dream self are beginning to blur for Sarah's real self, or her observing self. The next morning, the dream is over and Sarah wakes up, still in the mental hospital. But there is now another person in the room, in the second previously empty bed which Sarah has sleepwalked into during the night. By the way, I love how they form this shape of symmetry. It's really cool. It's almost like a little two halves of a brain, right? This is the same person from Sarah's dreams. The girl tells her that she's from 1995 and seemingly having her own struggles with time loss. Sarah mentions the abductions and the white ramp over the water, which the girl recognizes from her own dream. There must be something strange going on, right? Aliens? No. This girl is not real. This is Sarah disassociating. We previously saw this persona in her dreams, once laying on the table in the alien abduction room, and again in her last dream as the proxy for her roommate. And now she's Sarah's chaos, all wrapped up and birthed into a person. It's so bad that even this proxy has her own delusions and major time loss issues as well. This conversation is between the version of Sarah that believes herself to be whole and another who believes itself to be someone else. And the real Sarah is the observer to the dialogue. For us, to watch Sarah not believe that the girl is her, we must be Sarah, the third bystander. As Sarah is no longer one character in this film, Sarah is divided. Part believes itself to be the true self, and the other a completely new character, which, as the chaos grew, we began to see the birth of her in previous dreams. She carries the issues that the pretend self couldn't deal with, so if we, the audience who have been watching the real Sarah in this film, similar to that of like an invisible CCTV camera, are no longer watching Sarah, where is Sarah? Especially in context with these scenes. Well, Sarah doesn't exist anymore for us. That is to say that because she is divided, she cannot be one. And we are watching the story of her truth, as we have been before, down to her dreams. Unable to depict the real Sarah, maybe she's medicated, maybe the concept of her is impossible to depict because she is the great eternal observer of this interaction. We are now in Sarah's mind, or how Sarah sees her mind, and we are witness to the dialogue being played out by the character shadows of herself, the pretend truth and the chaos, with their own backstories no less. Anyway, this is happening. However, it's all within Sarah's mind, or in the world around her, depending on your perspective of time and space. And I mean that completely literally. It is an ultimate micro versus macro point of view at this stage of storytelling, which again is just genius. So what we see from now on is completely in the mind and or world around her, to the fullest extent of both of those terms. In a session with her social worker, we learn that she has been in the facility for 3 days, and she'll be released today. But Sarah thinks she's only been there for one night. We know, however, this conflicts with the previous conversation they had where he had said he had met her last week, which she now mentions and he doesn't remember saying. Sarah is probably very drugged up, but as we are seeing her as she sees herself, she believes he to be the one who is incorrect, and she is the lucid and comprehensible one, as one might if they had spent 3 days disassociating to the extent that she had. Sarah tells him about the girl in the room, and that she has realized she's not a clone, but instead Sarah is her grandmother. You heard it, I heard it. The social worker wants her to continue seeking help now that she has to leave the facility, but Sarah informs him that she knows what she needs to do now. And she pulls a knowing face. It's an expression we haven't seen from her before. Still suffering from a complete dissociation, like a delusion within a delusion and so on. Released from the institute, Sarah gets dressed up like her grandmother and steals her horse Willow from the farm. Putting the knitted necklace she made for him around his neck, we cut to Sarah walking the horse outside, then past her workplace. Inside, Joan is at work, but gets a glimpse of the horse walking by outside, leaving her confused. This is the same moment from the start of the film where Joan saw the horse. Cut to a forest by a golf course, where Sarah continues walking with the horse into the woods, to what looks to be a specific spot. After a sweet moment with Willow, who is wearing the necklace, Sarah lays down on the ground, and as the daylight fades and the horse grazes nearby, she is beamed up into a light from the sky that disappears. All that remain are her shoes and the horse. Now we're really in a delusion within a delusion within a delusion. Sarah recedes into a deeper disassociation from the true self, so much so that she is able to be the observer of her own scene of the film, the final scene, but without any corporeal representation. At least the version before her was the pretend self, and the version before her might have been a bit realer, and the one prior to her mother's death was probably a lot more well-rounded, and there is no doubt that if she hadn't been witness to the tragic accident of her friend on the horse, she would have maybe not dissociated to begin with at all. For that is the film we've watched. It's the extension of someone's psyche. When we followed her into the dreams as the audience, we didn't see what was happening to her in the real body. We didn't see her fall asleep in the car outside Ron's. We didn't see her fall asleep at the water tanks. And the 2 times we saw her fall asleep in her room to the voices outside the door were actually the start of her dreams themselves. We, the viewers, are following the observation of Sarah's self, and now she doesn't even see it. Wow. I really enjoyed this film. It's a great mystery with lots of clues and different possible interpretations. She could have been her grandmother, or a clone, or it could have been aliens, but they're all unlikely. Sarah had a lack of reasoning, friends, and family to help her navigate her issues. When Sarah was searching online for memory loss causes, everything pointed towards slow carbon monoxide poisoning, but she was already researching alien abductions, which is a lot more glamorous. The nosebleeds and bruising, according to the doctor, might have been symptoms of anemia, but she was already sold onto the clone idea by that point thanks to season 5 of Purgatory. Moreover, Sarah heard the homeless man screaming about statico-satellite, causing another seed to be planted, that she would later regurgitate when she was at the cemetery. We know that Ron walked past her place of work prior to her dream, meaning Sarah probably planted his appearance into her dream, not the other way around. Then there's the girl from the dream who manifests in her bedroom at the facility who is called Jane Doe in the credits. We never see this girl interact with anyone in real life except for Sarah. We only saw her in dream sequences, and then Sarah wakes up and they're both in bed together. And she also knew about the white ramp from the dream, which, as mentioned before, leads me to believe that they're the same person. Sarah is dissociating into another character or part of herself. When hearing Joan's voice from the future talk to her on the phone, Sarah is experiencing time occurring abnormally, which is a known symptom of dissociative behavior. We know that she has issues telling the passage of time later at the institute, where she heard the social worker say he met her last week. Then the story changed to suggest that she had been sectioned for only 72 hours. Both can't be true, but we hear both, meaning we are witnessing the film from Sarah's point of view only, and it's confusing to her and to us. Was her family history of mental health issues a self-fulfilling prophecy, or did her past traumas send her down a road of delusion? Does it matter? Everyone was failing her, regardless of the root cause of her mental issues, and we got to see and feel what was created in their absence and failure. Sarah held on to photos of the past, her horse that she could no longer ride, her crafts, her job, and a TV show aptly named Purgatory to keep her company. But there is one big part of the puzzle that requires further examination. Joan. Firstly, Joan saw the horse twice, at the start and at the end of the film. Both times Sarah is standing next to her. Is Sarah standing next to her? See, we don't know who that woman is at the second time. Well, that's the problem. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. But yeah, anyway. Secondly, Joan kept hearing the phone ring, but there was no one on the other end of the line. I'm still thinking about who that person was, who that could... Because... No, I don't have to think. I've got the answer. It's in the script. Carry on reading. Secondly, Joan kept hearing the phone ring, but there was no one on the other end of the line. Was the carbon monoxide leak occurring at work and they were both suffering from different symptoms? As I'd mentioned at the start, it was my first thought. It was also a great red herring that I needed to investigate and dismiss. So then this means Joan is a representation of how Sarah wants Joan to see her, as part of the cycle that starts and ends with her on the horse, again in her world or mind. You either get the point of view or you don't, and that's the problem. You can't unless you can. It's beautiful. For in Sarah's mind, she would want Joan, a woman she loves, is close to and admires, to see Sarah with her horse by her side. The last time Joan actually saw her, Sarah was having moments of lucidity. I mean, she literally woke up and saw herself standing naked. Well done. And that was between the sleepwalking and the moment we saw her disassociation from relative time, when she was on the phone. Sarah eventually becomes a martyr to the conspiracy she has connected, conjured, and was living in. She creates her own world, and within this world, it almost has its own religion, and only she knows the rules of it. That includes her horse wearing a necklace and the blender preventing Statico satellite from hurting her. But then the transition to a place of no self, as she does at the end of the film, for we the viewer are her, being her, watching her. That means she had to go through the process of completely disassociating from herself into Jane Doe, who by chance validates her delusion by also seeing the white ramp in her dreams. What about Joan's phone calls? Okay, so I love this motif so much, and the two hellos and how this film uses time, it's all just very cool. Here's where I get a little bit more creative, and I might be completely wrong, but here's my take on it. So anyway, we're in her mind. We are the audience. We are also Sarah. Somewhere in the real world, someone is trying to get through to Sarah. Hence, the phone keeps ringing. And everyone keeps saying, hello, hello, twice, as if there's no one on the other end of the phone. We know Sarah has mentally checked out of reality, not in, as she needs to do. To check in would be to answer the phone, which she finally does for a moment when she picks up the phone in the office to hear the future on the other end. This time distortion is the real world, bleeding through into her secondary world, where of course time is happening after the real world for us, the real Sarah. Writers Jeff Beener and Alison Brie set up a perfect mystery to which I think there is a definite answer. I'm not saying I have it, but it's what I saw, and that's my world within my world, right? The genius of this film is not knowing where the dreams start and end, and that continues through into not knowing where the self starts and ends, or in Sarah's case, how much of what is happening in the real world, and to the real self, is being acknowledged, understood, and absorbed. In the last scene, where Sarah is being carried into the sky, we question, is Sarah going back into the real world? Has she picked up the phone and answered whoever is saying hello to her, through Joan, the only embodiment of real care towards Sarah, and the only character trying to help her unearth her true past through a DNA test? Or, if we remain as both Sarah and the audience for a moment, the next scene suggests that instead of her becoming more self-aware, due to her absence, she is descended into another dissociative state, already within multiple levels of dissociation. In the rules that this film sets up, both are technically true, but the main focus is that Sarah is gone, because she truly believes that she's gone. That is to say that she no longer is in this delusion, but where she has gone is not the question. For now, she is further awoken or deeper asleep. This moment of emptiness exists without her. That's the only way she can be free, if she doesn't exist in it, but it previously existed with her presence in it. The director Jeff Beener and cinematographer Sean McElwee have crafted together a tapestry of scenes that flow and bleed into one another just enough to provide the perfect amount of confusion and clues for those seeking their version of its truth. Visually, this film guided me deeper into the dream world, slowly but efficiently, without being hokey or duplicative. As someone mentioned on IMDb, the use of blue and orange to signify Sarah's mental state is a lovely tool we can use to understand and navigate what's about to happen to Sarah as she divorces herself further from the self. Which leads us into Purgatory, the TV show Sarah watches. As a diehard fan of the TV show Lost, which I've now rewatched like 3 times at least, I know how much a story can connect with people, especially at times when we need a friend. By and large, humans turn to fiction either in a novel that we've read before, or more commonly since the golden age of TV, a show that connects with us. The TV show Lost was there for me when I needed it, as was Purgatory for Sarah when her mother died. Furthermore, with each rewatch of Lost, I took away new lessons about the show and myself. something we see Sarah do when she associates her own issues with the clone storyline in her favourite fiction show, Purgatory. Escapism is a great tool to help cope with life. However, if your grip on reality is weak and you're not grounded, it can be very dangerous. I have suffered my own versions of dissociative issues and know how scary these experiences can be. As Sarah's social worker says, the experiences she has are very real to her, and when describing them, she is speaking from a place of truth, something I recognise all too well. What's more, I have a family history of depression and dementia, so this film was relatable for the fear of what we carry in our DNA. Sarah had a very poor support around her, and this is how she remembers them. They are all real, but unfortunately, they didn't have the tools to understand and manage her issues. Joan tells Sarah she can just replace negative thoughts with happy thoughts, which, whilst is true, it isn't working for Sarah, which Joan finally realises and seeks professional help. Sarah's flatmate Nikki spends most of the film wrapped up in her own life, that when all the signs that Sarah require extra support are right in front of her, she can't see it and doesn't escalate the situation to someone who can. Gary throws money at her, Paul Reiser. The horse keepers only care about the horses, and Darren is so caught up in finding love that it literally takes Sarah wanting to exhume a corpse for him to realise that something is terribly wrong. And then all he does is tell her flatmate's boyfriend, who doesn't care about her anyway. It's no wonder that when we're in crisis, we turn to fiction, when those around us are blind to what's going on right in front of them. The characters in Purgatory become closer to Sarah than the people around her. This is not a new phenomenon. It is an indication of the lack in humanity we sometimes have for one another, when we can't be there for people who are suffering from issues such as Sarah. But if you can't see it from their perspective, then friends can never know the severity of the issue. Sarah needed friends to talk to, but also family to support her, medical assistance for her potential anemia, and a wise person to keep her grounded in reality. She had none of those things, and it led to her being, well, a horse girl. Of the most extreme degree, I should add. Finally, I also need to mention the cast, who were all amazing in this film. Toby Huss is always a pleasure to watch. His scenes can just be a moment in the film, but he invokes something that makes them feel like they can go on forever. If you haven't seen him in *Halt and Catch Fire*, I highly recommend it. Molly Shannon pulls a beautifully understated and unassuming role in this film, which is great to see. Mary Apic as the tarot reader was cool. Jake Pickering's rapping was even cooler. And David Paymer as the Doctor was a lovely present that grounded the film in reality before sending us back into chaos. And of course, Paul Reiser. Who would have thought the guy from My Two Dads is now getting an "and" before his name? Anyway, I could go on. They're all amazing, and I'm sure it's a combination of their skills as actors combined with insightful direction that meant their performances were all so believable. Of note, I read that the cast were given a wider license than normal to improvise their dialogue, and I think it really paid off. But without a doubt, Alison Brie's performance makes this film. I didn't know just how much I liked her as an actress until I saw this film. As mentioned previously, the moments where she's interacting with customers is just homely and delicate. It makes me feel like I'm eating ice cream on the sofa. Moreover, the moments where she is dissociating or dreaming are equally delicate. She doesn't overact, which one could easily do in a part like this. Instead, she toes the line of confusion and instability just enough for us to empathise with the truths that we are presented with, whilst also keeping our feet grounded in reality as viewers and mystery solvers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this film and any other interpretations, so please send them to me or leave them in the comments. Remember, we all know a horse girl or have gone through our own horse girl phases, so let's just be nice to each other and rise to the occasion when someone needs you. Thanks.